At Thanksgiving, my son got a cracked toy truck, while my brother's kid unwrapped a new Xbox, a bike, and a stack of gift cards. I walked to my car, brought in the $4,600 worth of gifts I had bought, and said, these were for kids who didn't laugh at mine. Not anymore. The table went silent until my brother stood up and shouted. Colt turned the truck over in his hands. He held it the way 7-year-olds hold things they know are wrong, but have not yet learned the word for, which is carefully, like the problem might go away if they just find the right angle. The crack ran diagonally across the hood, from the left headlight to the windshield. The paint was chipped along the line. The front axle wobbled when he rolled it across his palm. Across the living room, Colby was pulling the Xbox out of its box. 9 years old, both knees on the carpet, wrapping paper piled around him like a nest. Next to the Xbox was a mountain bike with a red ribbon on the handlebars. Next to the bike was a stack of 6 gift cards fanned out on the coffee table like a poker hand. Target, GameStop, Amazon, Chick-fil-A. 2 Visa prepaid cards, $50 each. 12 people were in my parents' living room. My father Herschel in his recliner, my mother Lorene on the love seat, my brother Tanner standing by the fireplace with his wife Ainsley. 3 of Herschel's army buddies from Fort Riley in folding chairs along the wall. 2 neighbors from across Orchard Street. My godfather Duff McGuire in the chair by the window with a plate of pie on his knee. Colt had not said a word. He was sitting cross-legged on the carpet 4 feet from Colby's pile of wrapping paper. The cracked truck was in his lap. He ran his thumb along the crack once. He did not look up. He did not look at me. He looked at the truck the way a child looks at a thing that has just confirmed something he was already afraid of. Colby held up the Xbox box. He turned to Colt. He said, loud enough for the folding chairs and the recliner and the love seat and the fireplace to hear, I got the good stuff. What did you get? Colt held up the truck. The crack caught the light from the window. Colby laughed. One laugh. Short, the kind of laugh a 9-year-old makes when he has heard adults laugh at something small and has learned to copy the sound. Nobody else in the room said anything. My mother looked at the floor. My father looked at the television, which was off. Tanner was looking at his phone. Ainsley was looking at Tanner. Duff was looking at me. The rolling pin was on the kitchen counter. Grandmother Marin's maple rolling pin, worn smooth from 40 years of Thanksgiving pie crust. She had given it to me when I was 16 because you were the only one who ever stood in my kitchen and paid attention. Every year I make the pies. Every year the family eats them. Every year nobody mentions Marin. The rolling pin sits on the counter while the presents get opened. And nobody touches it because nobody cares about it except me and Colt, who calls it the pie stick and knows not to use it as a sword. Colt put the truck in his lap. He pressed both hands flat on his knees. He did not cry. A 7-year-old boy who does not cry when he opens a broken toy at Thanksgiving is not brave. He is trained. He has been trained by 2 years of watching his cousin get things and getting less, and knowing the difference, and knowing that saying the difference out loud will make the room go quiet, and the quiet will be blamed on him. I stood up. The trunk of my car had 6 bags in it. They had been packed that morning at 5 a.m. in my kitchen on Catalpa Lane while Colt slept and the pie dough proofed in the fridge. Each bag was wrapped. Each had a handwritten tag. Colby, Ainsley, Tanner, Herschel, Lorene, Duff, $4,600. That is what the receipt said. I keep every receipt in a folder in my glove compartment because I am a supply chain logistics manager, and keeping receipts is not a habit. It is a reflex. The front door opened. The November air came in with me. 6 bags. 3 trips to the car and back. Each bag set down on the dining room table, which was still covered in the Thanksgiving cloth my mother puts out every year. The one with the embroidered acorns she bought in 2006. 12 people watched me set the bags down. Colt was still on the carpet. Colby had put the Xbox controller down. Duff had set his pie plate on the windowsill. Tanner had put his phone in his pocket. I stood behind the table. 6 bags in front of me. The tags facing the room. These were for kids who did not laugh at mine. Not anymore. I picked up the first bag. Colby's. I put it back in the crook of my arm. Then the second. Ainsley's, then Tanner's, then Herschel's, then Lorene's. Duff stayed on the table because Duff has never laughed at my son, and Duff's gift was not leaving the room. 5 bags. Back through the front door. Into the trunk. The trunk closed. The latch clicked. The November air stung my face. The driveway was quiet for about 4 seconds. Then the front door opened, and Tanner came out. He did not walk to me. He stood in the doorway with both hands on the frame. Behind him, through the door, 12 people were visible in the living room, all of them frozen in the specific posture of adults who are watching something they do not know how to intervene in. Tanner's voice went up. Not a raised voice. A shout. The kind of shout a man makes when he has been publicly exposed and has decided the problem is volume. You come into Dad's house, insult our family, insult our kids, and then you steal the presents back like some kind of deranged Grinch. Get back inside and put those bags back on the table, or I swear to God, Pierce, I will call the police and report you for theft. The 2 neighbors from across Orchard Street were on the front porch now. They had followed the sound. One of them, a woman named Marcy, was holding a glass of wine she had carried from the living room without realizing it. The other, her husband Ronnie, was standing with his hands in his pockets looking at the ground the way men look at the ground when they are hearing things they will talk about later in their own kitchen. I did not answer Tanner. I turned and walked back through the door, past him, past the dining room table, past the 5 empty spots where the bags had been. Duff's gift was still on the table. 1 bag, 1 gift. The only person in the room who had never made my son feel like the wrong grandson. I sat down in the chair next to Colt. He leaned into my arm. His hair smelled like the pumpkin shampoo Jolene sends from Portland every other month because she cannot be here, but she can make sure his hair smells right. Tanner followed me in. He stood in the middle of the living room. His chest was still moving from the shout. His face was red in the way faces get red when the blood goes to the surface faster than the argument can justify it. He looked at Herschel. He looked at Lorene. He was waiting for backup. Herschel delivered it from the recliner. You walked in here and made Thanksgiving about you. Again, every holiday with you is a performance. A man who counts boxes in a warehouse for a living walks into my house and acts like buying presents makes him important. Your brother sells cars. Your brother closes deals. Your brother built a family that people want to be around. You built a divorce and a boy who sits in corners. Colt does not need an Xbox. Colt needs a father who does not turn every room he enters into a courtroom. Tanner nodded from the middle of the room, the way younger brothers nod when the speech they were hoping for lands exactly the way they wanted it to. The 3 army buddies in the folding chairs went still. Garnett was holding a can of Coors raised halfway to his mouth. The can stayed there. The 2 neighbors had come back inside and were standing near the kitchen doorway, looking at the television that was off. Ainsley had moved from the fireplace to the edge of the couch. She was sitting with her knees together and her hands in her lap, and she was looking at Colt. Her eyes had the specific weight of a woman who has watched this happen before and has never said anything, and is deciding, in this room, on this Thursday, that the not saying has a cost she is no longer willing to pay. Lorene had not moved. Lorene had not spoken. She was looking at the carpet between her feet the way she looks at the carpet when something she engineered is happening, and she has decided her role is to be present but not accountable. I reached behind me to the kitchen counter. Grandmother Marin's rolling pin was where I had left it after rolling the pie dough that morning. The maple was cool. The surface was smooth. 40 years of flour and butter in Marin's hands. I held it for 3 seconds. Not as a weapon, as a compass. Something to hold when the room is loud and every sentence aimed at you is a sentence you have heard before in different rooms at different ages, and the only new thing is that your son is sitting next to you, hearing it for the first time. I looked at Herschel. This truck has a Target code on the box. I bought it last November for Colby. You returned it December 26th. The store credit bought the Xbox. 24 words. Herschel's jaw went loose. His hands, which had been on the armrests of the recliner, tightened until the veins across the backs of them stood out. His right knee uncrossed, and both feet went flat on the floor. His chin, which had been lifted for the speech the way a retired Enso lifts his chin when he wants the room to hear him, dropped a quarter inch. His eyes went to Lorene. Lorene's eyes were still on the carpet. She did not look up. She was not going to look up. Looking up would mean acknowledging that the system she had been running for 3 years had a receipt trail. And Lorene had believed that receipts were things other families kept, but not the Holloways. Because the Holloways were a family, and families do not audit each other. They do now. Tanner sat down. He did not decide to sit down. His legs made the decision. The nearest surface was the arm of the couch. He sat on the arm. The couch arm is not a seat. It is the thing people sit on when they need something underneath them and do not care what it is. His mouth was open a half inch. His phone was in his back pocket. He did not reach for it. Duff picked up his pie plate from the windowsill. He took a bite. He did not say anything. The pie was good because the pie is always good because Marin taught me to make it, and Marin never made a bad pie in her life. If this is the story you came for, subscribe to Family Secret Tales. Because the cracked truck was not the beginning. The cracked truck was the receipt. My name is Pierce, 38 years old. Supply chain logistics manager at Intermountain Distribution on Gowan Road in Boise. 14 years in freight routing, vendor contracts, and warehouse inventory. The job means knowing what things cost, where they come from, how they move, and where they end up. It also means keeping records. Every pallet, every invoice, every routing discrepancy, every miscount. A miscount in my warehouse is a financial event. A pattern of miscounts is a theft investigation. I have been trained to see patterns the way a doctor is trained to see symptoms. And the cracked truck on my son's lap was a pattern I recognized the moment Colby laughed. Colt is 7. He reads books at family events because the cousins play rough and Colt does not play rough. He is not shy. He is careful. He watches a room before he enters it. He counts the adults before he picks a chair. He knows which chair is close to the door in case things get loud. He has been doing this since he was 5, which was the year Jolene and I separated, and the year he learned that adults in a room can change direction without warning. My godfather, Duff McGuire, has been the only constant. Duff is 67. He served with Herschel at Fort Riley in 1983. They were in the same motor pool. Herschel was the kind of soldier who earned respect by volume. Duff was the kind who earned it by showing up early and leaving late and never needing anyone to notice. They were friends for 35 years. Duff promised Herschel he would look after Pierce if anything happened. What happened was not a deployment injury. What happened was Herschel came home from the Army and bought a recliner and put it in the corner of a living room and sat in it and decided that one of his sons would be the son who mattered and the other would be the son who paid for the mattering. Duff could not change that. He is not the kind of man who changes other men. He is the kind of man who finds the person being changed and stands next to them until the changing stops hurting. The day my divorce was finalized, Duff drove 3 hours from Twin Falls with a slow cooker of elk chili and a bottle of root beer, because I do not drink. He did not mention Jolene. He did not mention the marriage. He did not mention Colt's custody arrangement or the apartment I was moving into, or the fact that my father had called the divorce inevitable for a man who cannot hold a room. He put the chili on the counter. He put the root beer next to it. He sat at my kitchen table for 3 hours while Colt watched cartoons in the next room. The table was the only furniture I had unpacked. The chairs were folding chairs from the warehouse. The kitchen had no curtains. Everything was wrong. Duff sat in the wrong light on a folding chair at a bare table, and he did not say a word until I finally sat down across from him. Then he looked at the slow cooker and said, "The chili has too much cumin. Your grandmother Marin would have told me." That was the sentence that made me laugh for the first time in 6 weeks. Not because it was wise. Because it was Marin's name in a room that felt like it had no history in it, and Marin's name was history enough. That is who I have. That is what the rest of them do not understand about me. The people I choose to keep are the people who do not need me to perform. Sunday morning after Thanksgiving. The kitchen table on Catalpa Lane. Colt was at a playdate. The house was quiet. The cracked truck was on the table in front of me. The Target price tag was still on the box. The barcode was intact. I opened my Target Red Card app. The app tracks every purchase and every return on my account. My gifts for the family had been purchased on this card for 3 years. The 5% discount. The digital receipts. All stored. 14 return transactions appeared on my account that I had never initiated. December 26th, 27th, and 28th. 3 consecutive years. All processed at the Boise Fairview Avenue Target. Each return converted to store credit. The store credit had not been issued to my loyalty number. It had been issued to a different loyalty account. The account belonged to Lorene Holloway. 3 years. Year 1, $4,200 in gifts purchased, $3,840 returned. Pierce kept Duff's gift because Duff always picked his up himself on Christmas morning. Year 2, $3,800 purchased, $3,480 returned. Year 3, $4,600 purchased, $4,280 returned. Total returned over 3 years, $11,600. Total store credit issued to Lorene's loyalty account, $11,600. Total store credit used to purchase gifts for Colby, $11,600. The Xbox, the bike, the gift cards, 3 years of birthdays and Christmases for the golden grandchild, all funded by returning the gifts the other grandchild's father had bought. The cracked truck had a DPC code on the tag, 087160419. I searched my year 2 purchase history. November 23rd, 2 years ago. Target, 1 Hot Wheels monster truck, premium edition, $41.99. Purchased for Colby. Returned December 26th. Store credit, $42.17. The truck had gone into the returns bin. It had come out of the returns bin with a crack across the hood. My mother had found it there. She had chosen it. She had wrapped it. She had put Colt's name on the tag. I almost closed the app. I almost decided that $11,600 in return gifts was enough to know. The rolling pin was on the counter. Marin's maple. The wood caught the morning light from the kitchen window. Colt's cereal bowl from breakfast was in the sink. The house was quiet. The pattern was not. I opened my bank statements. For 3 years, I had been contributing $1, $800 a month, to what my father called the Holloway Family Reserve, an emergency fund for family expenses, medical emergencies, roof repairs, car trouble, the kind of fund a responsible family keeps. I had set up the auto pay 3 years ago when Herschel called and said, "Pierce, we need to start thinking about the future." I had not questioned it because my father was a retired Army INSO, and when he said we need to, he meant you will. And I had been trained to hear the second sentence inside the first since I was 12 years old. 3 years. $1,800 a month. $64,800. The Holloway Family Reserve was a savings account at Idaho Central Credit Union. Herschel's name was the only name on it. My deposits went in on the 1st of every month. The withdrawals went out on the 3rd. Monthly transfers of $1,700 to a checking account belonging to Tanner Holloway. $61,200 over 3 years. Tanner's used car lot, Holloway Motors on Emerald Street, had a lease of $2,400 a month. The lot had been running negative revenue for 14 months. The lease had been subsidized by the $1,700 monthly transfer from the Holloway Family Reserve, which was funded entirely by my autopay, which was labeled family expenses on my bank statement and strategic investment on Herschel's. I pulled my credit report next. A new business entity had appeared on my credit monitoring 2 months ago. Holloway Motors LLC, filed with the Idaho Secretary of State. Operating agreement dated 16 months ago. 2 members listed. Tanner Holloway, managing member. Pierce Holloway, silent partner. My Social Security number was on the filing. The signature on the operating agreement was supposed to be mine. It was not mine. The letter P in the signature leaned left. My P leans right. My brother had forged my name on a business filing and made me liable for $127,000 in accumulated business debt without my knowledge or consent. I closed the laptop. I sat at the kitchen table with both hands flat on the surface. The rolling pin was 3 feet away on the counter. The cracked truck was in front of me. The cereal bowl was in the sink. The November light was thin and gray, and the house was the kind of quiet that happens when a person has just discovered that the family he has been funding for 3 years has been stealing from him with the precision of a supply chain, and the supply chain manager had not noticed because the supply chain manager had trusted the vendor. I almost called my father right then. The phone was in my hand. His number was on the screen. The $64,800 in family contributions was on the bank statement in front of me, and the $61,200 in transfers to Tanner's checking account was underneath it, and the forged LLC was on the Secretary of State website, and the words Pierce Holloway, silent partner, were on a document I had never signed. I put the phone down. Calling would give him a chance to explain. Explaining is what Herschel does best. He would have a version ready in 40 seconds. He would say it in the voice of a man who has been in charge of rooms for 40 years. And the version would be wrong, but it would sound right, and that is what Herschel has always relied on, which is that his voice is more convincing than the truth. This time the truth had receipts. Receipts do not need to sound convincing. They just need to be accurate. If you have made it this far, subscribe to Family Secret Tales. Because the cracked truck and the returned gifts and the phantom emergency fund and the forged LLC were 4 layers. There was a 5th, and the 5th was the one that made the other 4 look small. Ainsley texted me on the following Wednesday, 4 days after Thanksgiving. We had known each other for 8 years. She had been my coworker at a fulfillment warehouse on Orchard Street before she married Tanner. She had introduced us at a company picnic in 2017. She had watched the family dynamic for 8 years without saying a word, because saying a word would have ended her marriage, and she had not been ready to pay that price. On Thanksgiving, Colby had laughed at Colt's cracked truck. Colt had not cried. Ainsley had watched a 7-year-old press his hands flat on his knees and swallow whatever sound was trying to come up. And the not crying had been worse than crying, because a child who does not cry has already accepted something that should never be acceptable. Ainsley had been looking at Colt when she decided. Her text was short, 1 screenshot attached. The screenshot was a text from Lorene to Tanner, dated November 18th. 8 days before Thanksgiving, found the truck in the returns bin at Target. It has a crack on the hood. Perfect, give it to Colt. Pierce will not notice. That boy has never looked closely at anything his family gives him. My mother chose the cracked truck on purpose. She chose it because the crack would humiliate my son in front of his cousin. She chose it because she believed I would not notice. She had looked at me for 38 years and had decided that the man who keeps receipts in a glove compartment folder and tracks every pallet in a warehouse is a man who does not track the things that happen to his own child at Thanksgiving. I almost drove to Orchard Street that night. The keys were in my hand. Colt was asleep. The truck was already at Goodwill. The screenshot was on my phone, and the phone was hot in my palm, and the sentence "that boy has never looked closely" was the sentence that made the other sentences look quiet. I put the keys back on the hook. I sat at the kitchen table. The rolling pin was on the counter. Marin's maple. I did not pick it up. I just looked at it for a while. The maple was still there when the anger passed. The maple would still be there tomorrow. She was wrong about the counting. She was right that it took me 2 years too long to start. The 6 things that happened over the next 4 weeks are things. My attorney filed an identity fraud complaint with the Idaho Secretary of State on Monday morning. Holloway Motors LLC was flagged for review. The forged operating agreement was attached as Exhibit 1. Tanner's managing member status was suspended pending investigation. The $127,000 in business debt attached to my Social Security number was disputed through the FTC and all 3 credit bureaus. Equifax placed a fraud alert on my file within 48 hours. The Holloway Family Reserve account was frozen on Tuesday. My attorney presented Idaho Central Credit Union with 3 years of deposit records showing $64,800 in contributions from my checking account and $61,200 in transfers to Tanner's checking account. The bank froze the account and opened an internal review. Herschel went to the branch on Wednesday morning to withdraw $3,200. He was wearing his Army field jacket, the one he wears when he needs to feel like the man he was at 30. The teller told him the account was frozen pending a fraud investigation. Herschel stood at the counter for 9 seconds without saying anything. His mouth opened and closed once. His hand went to the counter and pressed flat the way his hand had pressed flat on the recliner armrest at Thanksgiving. He walked out. He sat in his truck in the parking lot for 22 minutes. He did not start the engine for the first 14 of them. A woman leaving the branch with her daughter saw him sitting there and later told her husband that the man in the silver truck looked like he was trying to remember how to turn a key. Lorene's Target loyalty account was reported to Target's fraud investigation unit. 14 return transactions over 3 years, totaling $11,600 in store credit generated from items purchased on another customer's account and returned without the purchaser's authorization. Target opened a case file. Lorene received a letter from Target's legal department the following Monday informing her that her loyalty account had been suspended and that any future purchases at any Target location would require government-issued identification at the register. The letter arrived at the house on Orchard Street in a plain white envelope. Herschel opened it because Lorene was at the grocery store. He read it twice. He put it on the kitchen counter next to the stack of mail Lorene had stopped opening since Thanksgiving. When Lorene came home and saw the letter, she picked it up, read the first paragraph, and set it back down. She did not pick it up again. She went to the bedroom and closed the door. The Target 2 miles from the house on Fairview Avenue, the one where she had processed 14 returns over 3 years, was now a store she could not walk into without showing her driver's license at the register. The store was on her daily route. She had driven past it every morning for 12 years. She would drive past it every morning for the rest of her time in this house. And every morning the building would remind her that she had been caught by a barcode. Tanner showed up at my distribution center on a Friday afternoon 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. He was half drunk. His shirt was untucked. His breath carried bourbon from 8 feet away. Security stopped him at the loading dock entrance. The shift supervisor paged me. Tanner was standing on the concrete apron with his hands at his sides and his eyes red, and his tie pulled loose around a collar that had not been ironed. His car was parked at an angle across 2 spaces in the visitor lot. The engine was still running. "Pierce, you need to call the Secretary of State and tell them you knew about the LLC. Tell them you signed it. Tell them it was mutual." I looked at him. Grandmother Marin's rolling pin was on my desk 40 feet behind me. I had brought it to work the Monday after Thanksgiving and put it next to my monitor where I could see it during the 8 hours a day I sit in that office, routing freight and checking vendor invoices and doing the exact kind of counting my father says does not matter. The rolling pin was there. I did not need to hold it. "Go home, Tanner. You are on camera." Security walked him to his truck. He tried to argue with the guard. The guard was 6'2" and had been a bouncer before he went into warehouse security, and he was not interested in Tanner's argument. Tanner got in the truck. He sat there for 4 minutes before he backed out. The dock camera had captured everything from the moment Tanner walked onto the apron to the moment his truck left the lot. The footage was on my attorney's desk Monday morning. Holloway Motors' lease defaulted at the end of December. The landlord changed the locks on January 3rd. Tanner drove to the lot on a Saturday morning and found a padlock on the front gate and a lien notice taped to the office window. 8 used cars sat in the lot behind the locked gate. The cars were not Tanner's. They were consignment vehicles from 3 private sellers who had entrusted them to Holloway Motors for resale. All 3 sellers filed claims against the business the following week. The total value of the consignment vehicles was $94,000. Tanner's attorney told him the personal liability exposure between the consignment claims and the lease default and the Secretary of State investigation was somewhere between $180,000 and $220,000. Tanner did not have $180,000. He did not have $18,000. His checking account had been surviving on my autopay for 3 years. The autopay stopped on December 1st. The checking account would be empty by the 15th. The family group chat had 26 people in it. On the Sunday after the dock incident, I posted one message. Dad has been transferring my $1,800 monthly family contribution directly to Tanner for 3 years. $61,200. The Holloway Family Reserve has one name on it. Dad's. Tanner forged my signature on his LLC operating agreement. My SSN is on his business debt. All documentation is with my attorney and the Idaho Secretary of State. Duff liked the message. Nobody else responded. By Tuesday, 9 people had left the chat. Herschel's sister left first. She did not say goodbye. Garnett left second. Before leaving, he sent one private message to Herschel. You told me Pierce was doing fine and that the family fund was real. I lent you $2,000 in September because you said the fund was short. I want it back. Herschel did not reply. By Friday, the chat had 17 people, and none of them had spoken in 6 days. The last visible message was mine, and underneath it was Duff's thumbs up. And underneath that was silence. Sunday morning. 5 weeks after Thanksgiving. Kitchen on Catalpa Lane. The light through the window was December light, pale and thin, the kind that makes every surface look clean. Grandmother Marin's rolling pin was on the counter. It had been on the counter since Thanksgiving morning, and it was not going back in the drawer. The maple was warm from the kitchen heat. The surface caught the light the way surfaces catch light when they have been used for 40 years and have absorbed enough flour and butter and grip marks to hold a small history in the grain. Colt was at the kitchen table. He was eating scrambled eggs. He was using a fork that was too big for his hand because he had decided last month that he was done with the small forks, and I had not argued. His hair was messy. His socks did not match. The cracked toy truck was not in the house. It had gone into the donation bin at the Goodwill on Fairview Avenue the Monday after Thanksgiving. Colt had put it in the bin himself. He had not hesitated. He had set it in the bin and turned and walked back to the car and buckled his seatbelt and said, Dad, can we get a milkshake? We got a milkshake. Duff's truck pulled into the driveway at 9:14. He was early. He was always early. He got out with a thermos of coffee and a paper bag that smelled like the elk jerky he makes in his garage smoker in Twin Falls. He came through the back door without knocking because Duff has never knocked on my door in 38 years, and he is not going to start now. He set the thermos on the counter. He set the jerky next to the rolling pin. He looked at Colt. Morning, kid. Colt looked up from his eggs. Morning, Duff. Did you bring the spicy kind? I brought both kinds. The spicy kind is for your dad. The regular kind is for people with sense. Colt grinned. The grin was the grin of a kid who has one person in his life besides his father, who shows up without being asked and brings 2 kinds of jerky and calls him kid, and means it. Duff sat down at the table. He did not ask about Thanksgiving. He did not ask about the LLC. He did not ask about Tanner or Lorene or Herschel. He opened the jerky bag and he handed Colt a piece, and he said, Your grandmother Marin would have put this on a cracker with mustard. She put everything on a cracker with mustard. It was her only flaw. Colt laughed. The laugh was small and real, and it filled the kitchen the way small real things fill kitchens, which is completely. Across town on Orchard Street, Herschel's house was quiet. The recliner was in the corner. The television was off. The Holloway Family Reserve was frozen. The Target letter was on the counter. Lorene's loyalty account was suspended. Tanner's lot was padlocked. The consignment claims were piling up. The family chat had 17 people in it, and none of them had spoken in 6 days. Garnett's $2,000 request was unanswered. Herschel's sister had not called in 3 weeks. The acorn tablecloth from Thanksgiving was still on the dining room table because Lorene had not cleared it yet, and the tablecloth still had the ring from Duff's coffee mug and the crumb trail from the pie Pierce had made with Marin's rolling pin, and nobody in the house was going to make pie again this year because the person who made the pies had taken the rolling pin home and was not coming back. On Catalpa Lane, the kitchen was warm. The jerky was spicy. The coffee was strong. The rolling pin was on the counter. Colt's fork was too big for his hand, and he was using it anyway. If this story found you today, subscribe to Family Secret Tales and share it with the person who bought the gifts and made the pies and paid the fund and never got the toast. My grandmother Marin gave me a rolling pin when I was 16 and said I was the only one who paid attention. She was right about the paying attention. She was wrong about it being only the kitchen. The rolling pin is on the counter. The pie dough is in the fridge. The table has 2 people at it who do not need me to perform. The eggs are scrambled. The coffee is hot. And the boy with the fork that is too big for his hand is sitting in his own kitchen, in his own chair, in his own house, eating breakfast with a man who drove 3 hours to bring him jerky. Not because anyone asked, because that is what the people who matter do. They show up. They bring 2 kinds. And they do not need a receipt.